Well, thanks an awful lot, Joy. I'm glad to be here, and certainly pleased to have everybody who's listening in join us today as well. I'm going to cover some things that might be coming from a little bit different perspective than you're accustomed to hearing. Might be some new information, might be just some new perspective on it, but my goal here is to really sort of open your eyes to some of the changes that have occurred in the business market in general that actually have affected how you can develop a strategic exit plan and maximize the value and growth of your business quickly so you realize the ultimate returns along the way. You know, I work with a lot of different companies of all different sizes. Some of them are startups or very early stage companies. Some of them have companies that have been around for 10, 15, 20 years. And in interviewing these companies, as I begin to do the work I do with them, I typically ask a couple of key questions. One of the questions I ask is, what is your exit strategy? Now, you might be surprised by the kind of answers I often get to this question. There's a lot of different things that occur, but generally speaking, I get one of two answers, or different versions of these one or two answers. The first one is we don't have one really, and the second one is we're going to grow it and someone's going to buy us. Now, I appreciate that those are two interesting visions of what could happen in the future, but what I like to respond with is that's interesting, but those are not strategies. An exit strategy is something that gives you a roadmap or a specific set of actions or directions you're going to in order to generate the kinds of returns you want. So that's one area that I want to explore with you a little bit today. The second question I ask is, what drives you in your business? Now, when I ask this question, I get a lot of interesting answers, usually around revenue or profits or customers. You know, sometimes someone will just really tell the truth and say they don't really know. But the thing to understand about this is most business owners start their business with the idea that revenue growth, profits, customer acquisition, those sort of typical kinds of metrics are always the things that drive value. And what I want to share with you today is information that will tell you or show you that that's actually not always true. Now, that's not to say that revenue, profits, and customers are bad. That's certainly not the case. But you really need to understand, and you'll see from the presentation I'm going to share with you today, is you really need to understand specifically what drives value in your business. And that's going to give you the insights you need to make better decisions. And we're going to talk about that during the presentation today. The key is this. You know, how disappointing would it be for you to invest years of your life, right, all the work and effort, you know, building a business, all the sacrifice and all the time and so on and so forth, and to only generate modest or little or no returns in the end. And the truth is that I see that very frequently as I interview new clients or as I sit down with prospective clients and talk to them about, you know, their situation in their business. As a matter of fact, I would say that conservatively speaking, 85 to 90% of the businesses that I've interviewed with over the past 5 years have been disappointed with their first valuation. In other words, they've invested time, energy, money in their business. They get 5, 10, 15 years into it. They start thinking in terms of selling the business. They have a valuation done, and they say, wow, man, that's it? All that? And that's all it's worth? Right? And the reason for that is they never got focused on what's driving value. So the key is that without an exit strategy, without knowing what's actually accumulating value in your business, you can't make a lot of the most important decisions in your business. So without an exit strategy, you can't really make value-based decisions for growth. You can't know which markets are the best, which products are the best, which partners are the best, which employees are the best in order to grow value in your business. You can't structure the business for maximum returns. You can't orient it in the marketplace that generates the highest value return based on market conditions. It's very difficult, if not impossible, to create meaningful incentives for owners and employees of the business without knowing what drives value, right? And you really don't know how, when, or where to position the business for an exit. You're not operating strategically. You're allowing the tide, if you will, to carry you through the process of growing your business assuming all along that the further you got downstream, the more valuable your business would be. And that's an unsafe assumption in today's age. So I really want to spend some time on this today. Right? In the end analysis, without having an exit strategy, you never realize the success results that are really possible for you. So we want to talk a little bit more about that today as well. Right? So here's what I really want to cover. I want to talk about exit strategies and plans. I want to talk about what an exit strategy is and what it isn't. I want to talk about why every business owner needs an exit strategy right from the start. That means right now if you don't have one. When I get a new business or a startup that comes to me and says, what's the first thing I should do? Sometimes they're puzzled when I say we're going to develop an exit strategy. And you're going to see why as I go through this presentation here. Then I want to talk to you about how starting with the right exit strategy generates 100 to 400% larger returns, both short and long term for your business. That's an important thing to understand. And I want to talk to you about how the rules have changed and how you can realize returns you've never imagined possible as a result of the new rules of the game, if you will. How to capitalize on the best path for big returns and how to maximize the financial returns of your business, for yourself, and for your employees. Before I get too much further along, I want to tell you just a little bit about me. Joy gave you a little bit of background. I've been an entrepreneur for 41 years. As she mentioned, I sold my first business when I was 15 years old for close to $200,000. Sold my second business by the time I was 19 years old for almost $1 million. I've raised $1.5 billion in startup and growth funding for 11 different companies. I've exited 12 businesses with an average of $140 million each, 10 of them through M&A, one of them in an IPO. Led the mergers and acquisition teams for a very large hardware company where I managed the purchase of 9 additional technology companies. And of course, I'm the founding partner of Zero Limits Ventures, and we specialize in accelerating growth and creating high-value exits. Right? And along the way, I've consulted and coached with hundreds of entrepreneurs and helped them generate really astonishing levels of success. In Zero Limits Ventures, we're an advisory, consulting, and venture investment firm. We specialize in funding and funding strategies, growth reinvigoration strategies to increase valuation, and high-return exit strategies. We're purely sell-side and acquisition. We do no buy-side work. Right? We have access to over $5 billion in debt and equity growth capital partnerships serving virtually any industry. And we have relationships with the top-tier venture capital, investment banking, private equity, and law accounting firms out there. So what I want to do is tell you a little bit more about what is an exit. Now, you know, an exit, strictly speaking, is an event that alters control of the company. Some examples include liquidation, management buyouts, legacy transfers, mergers and acquisitions, employee purchases, IPOs. Some of these are different versions of the same sort of event, but really there's a very limited, it's re-emerging, but there's a very limited IPO market today. M&A seems to be the most viable and common exit event for most businesses that we have out there today, but management buyouts and restructuring are increasingly popular, and we're going to talk about some of those options as we go along. The key thing to understand here is that the exit event is where you're going to realize the real returns for all the time, money, and energy you invest in your business. You know, if you're building a business for the paycheck, then my recommendation is you go get a job because it's a heck of a lot easier, right? But if you're building a business to create value in the marketplace and create a legacy and have an impact and, you know, create value in your business so that in the future you can transition that business and generate a large windfall back to you, your family, your children, whoever it might be, then you're going to really want to understand how to develop the right kind of exit strategy. So what is an exit strategy? The first thing I want you to see is that an exit strategy is not something that just happens someday in the future. Unfortunately, this is the way a lot of business owners approach this. This is the we're going to build it and someone's going to buy us story. Or we're going to just go and, you know, someday, somewhere down the road, something else is going to happen. I'm going to give it to my kids or you know, whatever the case may be. The thing to understand about this is that, you know, the future is not so deterministic, and unless you build a plan, unless you take specific actions to generate specific kinds of results, the likelihood of you ending up at that place that you envisioned is very, very small. So really it's not that it just trends someday in the future. An exit strategy is an intentional and carefully planned process of identifying, characterizing, and qualifying potential suitors or potential buyers. It's aligning the company properly in the right high-value markets to achieve maximum valuation. It's leveraging specific high-return value drivers for each prospective buyer and preparing the company both internally and externally to garner a maximum value growth or price at acquisition. So that's really what an exit strategy is all about. Now, there are 5 top reasons why every business needs a real exit strategy on day one. The first one, I think, is probably the most important one, is it establishes the key value drivers for your business. And here's what I mean by that. It's going to focus you and your efforts on what makes your business worth the most. I'll give you an illustration. When you get down the road, understand that some businesses are going to want to buy you for a set of reasons that are relevant to their business. Some other business is going to want to buy you for a different set of reasons. Those reasons or those motivations for the interest in acquisition are known as value drivers. They're the things that those buyers are going to value most in your business. Now, there are generic value drivers that cut across that, good accounting records, good, good brand identity and so forth. Those are, in fact, horizontal value drivers. But the ones that affect value the most are the vertical value drivers, the ones that are specific to the prospective buyer. So here's the thing to understand. If you had a business who was interested in you, a buyer who was interested in you, let's say hypothetically because they wanted access to your customer base, right? And let's say they're going to value you at, let's say, 5 times earnings in order to get access to that customer base. If at the same time you had another business who was interested in buying you for your intellectual property or some methodology that you control in-house or something like that, and let's say they were going to value it, let's say, 8 times earnings, right? And I had $100,000 to invest in your business, where would you invest that money if that were your circumstance? Well, obviously, you'd invest that money in the intellectual property because that money is going to generate an 8 times return versus the 5 or whatever I said, the 5 times return, you see? So the point is that understanding and knowing your value drivers helps you focus your attention and make better business decisions about what's going to drive value in your business, right? So it forces you to make high-return decision priorities in all areas of your business: product development, management and employee alignment, market selection, recruiting, compensation, and so forth, you see? Also, the right exit strategy is going to generate 100 to 400% larger returns in the end. So clearly, you want to generate that kind of return in your business. The sooner you can get that aligned, the better off you're going to be. It also defines the company and owner and the mission statement. It helps you really get focused on what the company is all about, particularly when you realize that having your company aligned with a particular cause is a value driver. Cause marketing is a big value driver today. So if you align your company with some sort of community cause or global cause for good, whatever the case may be, you're going to get a valuation boost as a result. So having a value-driven exit strategy is going to help you define all the different things that are going to help you grow value in the business. And somewhat obviously, it's a prerequisite for startup or growth funding if necessary. I got a little picture here that I want to share with you that sort of illustrates what I'm talking about. If you look at this time horizon, the green bar along the bottom is what we do is in our practice in helping companies get and stay on an exit trajectory. The blue is sort of the volume of value that's being developed in the business itself. And you'll see that the yellow boxes are sort of different events or different stages of the business growth. And so as you go along, you see that at startup, your value grows somewhat modestly. Then you have some interesting events. You get your early customers, you get your product developed, and you start to increase your value. Then you hit a couple of key value milestones, and you get a big bump in the value there, right, and so forth. The key thing I want you to see is that the return generated by the exit event itself is almost twice the return generated by all the other work that you would have done up to that point. So the exit event is really what your business is all about. And getting aligned around maximizing that boost is really what's critically important to getting all there is to get out of your business. So here's a couple of basics about strategic exits. The key one here in our approach to business is that companies are sold, not bought. Now, there's a lot of investment bankers and private equity and mergers and acquisition teams out there that approach this the other way. They're looking for transactions. So if you had a business, you want to sell it, you know, they're going to come in, they're going to do their numeric analysis, they're going to do the valuation analysis, they're going to do sort of an industry top-down view of what your business is worth, and they're going to manage the transaction for you, right? To me, that's approaching it from the standpoint that a company is bought. What I want to do is get you to see that if you align yourself strategically, then position your company to be sold as opposed to being bought, then you're in control of the money that you collect for the business. You're in control of the end value of your business. The other way, the market is controlled. They determine what your business is worth. You may have heard this somewhere by now, that, you know, your business is basically worth what someone will pay for you. Well, I don't think that's true. I think your business is worth what you can sell it for, you see. So the other thing is that to realize that an exit strategy builds better results, even if you're not planning to exit. So, you know, I give this presentation all over the country at least twice a quarter. I travel around to different types of groups, several EO groups, as a matter of fact. But, you know, the bottom line here is that it doesn't matter to me if you're planning to exit your business now or not. The key is that if you put in place an exit strategy, that strategy will drive an increase in value of your business immediately and for the long term, whether you're planning to sell it in the near future or not. Now, there's another side of this equation, which is the simple fact of the matter is that every business owner will eventually exit his business one way or the other. I mean, hopefully it doesn't happen, but even if he collapses at his desk one day, he's going to exit. But having a plan in place is really the key to generating returns out of the investment you're making in your business, you see. And so you're going to build a better business by having an exit strategy, whether you want to exit or not. Now, there are a lot of reasons why big companies buy small ones, or, you know, one company buys another company. It doesn't have to be a big company. But there are four sort of big classes or typical classes for these reasons. And these help you sort of differentiate some of the distinct value drivers I was describing a little bit earlier. So, for instance, the first one is they want to sell your products to their customers, which basically means they need more product in their product suite, you see. And so they might be more interested in your ability to create products, secure intellectual property, that kind of thing, right? Create good viable product. The next one was to sell their products to your customers. Now, you see, so in this case, they're less interested about your products and more interested in access to your customers. So they need more market, so to speak, right? And here's the case I was giving you as an example. On the one hand, they're more interested in intellectual property, and the other hand, they're more interested in customer acquisition, you see. So they're going to value different things, and they're going to measure the effect of your company on their business in different ways. You see that? Right? So another reason is to leverage something of yours to make theirs better. This one's pretty common. It's sort of like more product, but it might just be a way to improve their offer, so add something more to their offer. Perhaps you have, you know, a support team or technical resources that could make their product more consumable or something like that. That might be an idea there. And the fourth one is to get your smart employees who make them more competitive. Right, this one is a pretty typical one. It's pretty common in the Bay Area, but I think you get the idea. Anything that will allow them to improve their base is something that will help them. Now, we had a really interesting experience not long ago. I'm going to mention it now. I'll mention it a couple more times. But, you know, when people tell me that, you know, doesn't revenue and doesn't earnings and doesn't customers really drive value in all businesses, I would say in some cases that's true. In most cases, that's certainly a contributing factor. But it's not in all cases, and here's a great illustration. We've had two recently. One of them was when Amazon bought Zappos for almost $1 billion. Now, what I like to do is have people who are thinking that it's all about revenue and customers answer a few questions. I'll ask them things like, so do you think that Zappos had any customers that Amazon didn't already have? And the answer is probably not. Anyone who's buying shoes online has probably bought something online from Amazon in the past, right? So probably no customers, or not very many anyway. The question then is, do you think Zappos sold any products that Amazon couldn't sell? The answer is absolutely not for that one, you see. So then the question becomes, well, okay, so if they didn't have any customers they couldn't get, and they didn't generate any revenue they couldn't get, they didn't generate any product sales they couldn't get, why did Amazon pay $1 billion for Zappos? The answer is in the transition that Amazon has initiated in moving their distribution centers out into the marketplace. They needed Zappos culture to pull that off. Now, not surprisingly, Tony Hsieh built the Zappos business with culture in mind. It's not like he built a cool company, discovered that it had a cool culture, and said, hey, let's market our culture. That isn't what he did at all. He started with the notion of building a company that was valued for its culture. That's why he made the investments he made. The value-based decisions he made were around feeding that key value driver, and it paid big time when Amazon bought them for $1 billion, you see. So it's important to understand these value drivers and understand where they fit into the overall strategy of your business going forward. Some other things that I've mentioned is there are 3 key factors affecting your valuation. Now, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's going to come out in your financial analysis. Financial analysis matters, there's no doubt about it, and that's within this first set of things here, right? So you have your technology, your IP, you have your customers and your reference base, right? These are value drivers, your revenue, profitability, business model, people and employees, market opportunities, strategic partners, others that are unique to the buyer. As I mentioned, Zappos culture was a critical one. Cause is a huge one right now. There's just an enormous amount of momentum around this whole cause marketing component. So what causes you support is a huge value driver, you see. So that's key. The other is an advantaged position in a high valuation market. Let me give an illustration of this one if I could. We worked recently with a trucking company that was doing quite well. They were a successful company. A couple of brothers went out and built a company. They were successful. They were, had a lot of contracts. About 85% of their payload was energy-related equipment, but they were very disappointed by their valuation. They were ready to sell the business, but they didn't like the return they were going to get. So we looked at ways that we could pivot them in the marketplace and generate a higher rate of return. We first started with something internal. They had a piece of software that they developed, which was helped them logistically. It was a planning software, and it helped them actually manage the logistics and gave them a competitive advantage in their local market or in their regional market. But we looked at the possibility of commercializing that piece of software and repositioning them more as a software provider to all the other trucking companies out there. And the fact of the matter was that while interesting, didn't really turn out to be a viable strategy for these particular people. So we looked at something else, and we found that the energy logistics market had a much higher valuation multiple than the trucking industry. So what we ended up doing was basically pivoting this company, rebranding them from a trucking company to an energy logistics company. We shifted them from being a trucking company, and we rebranded them as an energy logistics company. And what we got out of that was a significant value multiplier just by serving a different, higher valuation market. Right, so we did some other things. We had to change the color of their trucks. We changed their logo, of course. We amplified or magnified the messaging around the logistics software they had. We branded them as a logistics provider for the energy industry. We jettisoned the 15% of their payload that wasn't energy related and replaced it so everything they shipped, everywhere they went, was energy-related equipment, you see. So we made them an energy logistics company. They didn't change a lot of other stuff in their business, but they ended up selling that business for about $68 million, which was almost 2.5 times the valuation that they'd been given just 7 months earlier. So just pivoting into a different higher valuation market can get you there. And the other thing here is that your business needs to be paced to capture key windows of opportunity. Now, the best way for me to describe this is it's sort of like a horse race. When you think about it, there are a bunch of factors that are determining, how you're really going to come out in the marketplace. So if you look at a horse race in the beginning, they're all sort of lined up in the gates across the track. The gate goes up, the bell rings, all the horses rip out onto the track. And it might look like, to the uneducated observer like myself, it might look like those horses are just going flat out as fast as they can, and the first one to get around the track wins. Well, that's certainly what it looks like, but that's not what's actually happening. What's really happening is each jockey has a plan. They have a place they're supposed to be on that track, and they have a pace they're supposed to be running. So they're going to be moving at a particular pace, and they're going to try to orient themselves on the track so that they get the maximum result, i.e., the fastest path around that track for that particular horse, you see. And the same thing applies here. There's an industry, there's an environment you're working in. So you need to be able to navigate that environment so you make sort of the maximally efficient path through the noise, through the traffic, if you will. And then there's specific elements of the buyer. So there's a timing factor, there are economic factors, there's market factors that really affect the buyer. So you have to make sure you've paced yourself so that your emergence as an available acquisition is timed properly with the buyer who's going to pay the most money for your business, you see. So those are key elements that actually drive your valuation, right? So let me give you sort of an illustration now. If we look at a bunch of different markets, you've got, these are just some I selected, not completely at random, but some of the hotter markets right now. We have mobile, we have social media, cloud computing, of course. Sustainability is a huge opportunity right now. And there's some others that are out there sort of emerging. So if we look at, some reasonably hot markets that you would want to pivot into, for instance, then we overlay on that your company. And so here's this cloud sort of represents your company and all the different value drivers that exist in your company, right? There's revenue, people, employees, market share, profit, company culture, right? We mentioned that, strategic partners and so forth. So there's more than this, but this just gives you a general idea that, your company sort of expands across your particular hot market, if you will, okay? Then there's sort of a world of prospective buyers. Now, we like to refer to these as buying classes, okay? So there's bigger versions of you, right? So there's a bigger version of your company that might be interested in buying you. There's a strategic partner that might look at wanting to go ahead and, they're already partnered with you. They may want to go ahead and incorporate you into their business. There are competitors who may be interested in taking you out of the market and grabbing your piece of market share so that they get a bigger component. There's always private equity in the game, right? And there's obviously lots of others, but you get the idea. Each one of these buyers is going to value you differently based on specific elements of value drivers, the collection of value drivers in your particular business. So if you look at it that way, let's just say hypothetically that the bigger version of you is interested in buying you for your brand, right? And they value that at, let's just arbitrarily say, 2 times earnings. Then maybe a strategic partner wants to buy you for your intellectual property, and let's say they're going to pay 10 times earnings for that. Or a competitor, I'm losing track of the arrows, I can't really see them, but the competitor might be interested in your market share, maybe 20 times earnings. That would be pretty cool. And maybe private equity is mostly interested in revenue, and they want to cash flow or whatever it might be, and they might pay 5 times earnings. The key here is, as you can see from your guy up top there, is that you have to solve that puzzle, right? You have to really understand what all those motivations are and how you can position yourself in front of the ones that are most attainable for you in such a way that your business will actually realize the opportunity that's available to you. Okay, I hope that makes sense to you. Now, there are a couple of different things. I mentioned earlier that you could go to any M&A advisor, any investment banker, and say you want to sell your business, right? And they're going to go through what I would refer to as a typical exit event, right? So I'm going to just compare and contrast to typical versus strategic exits here. A typical exit, you started and funded your business, you've grown it organically, right? There's some bit of trial and error that's been involved, but you've managed to, to mature it and grow it to revenue and profitability, right? You You decide you want to sell the business. You start soliciting buyers. You prepare the due diligence. And here's the key. The value of your business is externally determined, right? The market determines what your business is worth. The results of that are generally a low probability of success, right? A pretty small percentage actually work out that well for the sellers. There's a somewhat limited rate of return. We'll look at that in more detail in a bit. You often get a much higher dilution. This is sort of a circular experience where because you never got focused on driving value, you might have turned through 3 or 4 years of static growth or marginal growth, which has dampened your valuation and caused you to take in more funding, therefore more dilution, let's say, right? And it's a lot of hard work. I mean, this is the reference to brain damage. It's just much more difficult to navigate this course this way. Where a strategic exit begins with the exit strategy. You know who your prospective buyers are. You've paced yourself with the industry window. You've aligned with market and value drivers. You've aligned with your go-to-market business model so that you're maximizing the visibility of those go-to-market value drivers. Right? You've aligned your funding sources, if necessary, with all of those items as well. So you've designed your business for maximum valuation. You are now in control of determining the value of your business, you see. The results are a much higher probability of success, maximum rate of return, very low or no dilution, and a much lower friction, right, because you've lined it up already. The skids are greased, if you will. You know, the ultimate of this one is we actually had an experience where we sold a company before we started it, right, because we went through the process of qualifying prospective buyers and what it is they actually needed, what problems they really needed solved. And then we went out and we put together a team, and I actually interviewed one of the prospective buyers before we put the team together and said, well, look, let's do a deal where we'll build this company that will provide these products, and if we meet these milestones, the deal is you acquire the company, right? So you can do it that way, right? It's not done every day. Certainly I wouldn't recommend it just for the average person, but the point is that because it was a strategically planned exit, it worked out beautifully, that everybody got what they wanted in the end, okay? So one of the puzzles that occurs for most business owners is this issue of timing. If we look at this 2x2 matrix where, you know, along the bottom here you have sort of, what the maturity of your business is, how far along, you are in growing your business. And on the other axis, the vertical axis, is, how active you are in putting together your exit strategy, okay? I've lost track of my slides here. There you go. So when you think about it, here, bear with me just a second. Okay, I'll somehow get back to it. Generally speaking, it's typical for business owners that the further they get down the active growing business thread, the more active they are in considering their exit strategy. So that sort of makes sense. You sort of get this clustering, out to the right. And what that means is they're actually sort of looking at this as if this quadrant here is the real target, right, that they're growing and they become successful. But what I want to tell you is that the real value in your business is over here. This is where you're going to generate the higher rate of return. And as soon as I can figure out how to get the slides back, there we go. Okay, now we're good. And let me explain to you why this is the case, okay? The rules have changed a bit, right? And what's really going on here in today's market segments, and today's environment is that product innovation cycles are much faster than they used to be, right? They're now measured in 16 to 18 months, where it used to be 2 to 5 years to bring a product to market, right? The internet, mobile, social media, all these technology innovations have really leveled the playing field. So small businesses can actually legitimately compete with big businesses in pretty much any market, right? Then there's, at the same time, large and medium-sized companies have lots of cash and are under enormous pressure to invest that capital. I have a number of companies who are private equity owned, and they've been told by their owners that, you get no more cash for R&D, but you can have all the money you want for M&A, right? Because here's what they know. they know that they can generate a higher rate of return by M&A, merging and buying other companies, than they can generate with research and development of their own products, right? So there's this huge trend, and you're seeing it played out in real time as we all read the entrepreneurial papers. You know, we just saw Snapchat offered $3 billion, was offered $3 billion by Facebook. I mean, there's a lot of chatter about, you know, why that was, and, you know, whether the guy was smart by not taking it or whatever the case might be. But you're seeing more and more of this kind of thing happen because there's so much pent-up financial capacity, and there's so many emerging new companies that can innovate products very quickly that it's sort of the perfect environment for M&A. So if we look at how that's affected things, what used to work, or worked in the days when I was building software companies, was that, you know, we have an idea to start a company. We generate a friends and family round or some other seed capital. We get our product built, right? We innovate, relatively slow, 2 to 5 years to get that product. Then we had to bring it into market, get some early customer acquisition, early adopters, that kind of thing. That was usually another 2 to 5 years, right? Might need some more funding along the way, so that means we're going to take on some additional dilution, right? Then we still need to get 2 to 5 consecutive quarters of growth, or profitability perhaps, right? So the average time to return on that effort and investment was 10 to 15 years, right? And it looked sort of like this, right? So if we map that in to a probability curve, you can see that there's a relatively low probability of success all the way through. There's a bit of a bubble out there around 12 years because you've gotten things aligned and really chugging, right? Well, what's really happening here is that the whole time that you're in this first, let's say, 10 years to this curve, you're at exposure to what we call negative value drivers. So what kinds of things can happen? Well, you can have a new competitor emerge, right? Takes value away from your business. You could foul up with a really important high-profile customer, pulls value out of your business. Could be a new government regulation that changes your marketplace, pulls value out of your business, you see? So the whole time you're on this time horizon, you're at risk of losing value, okay? So the net effect is that the average rate of return is long-term. You have a relatively low success probability due to those negative value drivers. Your valuation is constrained by the historic performance that you have here, right? You have fairly modest growth, and so you end up with high dilution and a relatively low investment rate of return to the owner, right? Because you perhaps have had to go out, raise more money, sell more of your company in order to keep it going, in order to keep the growth moving, and so on and so forth, you see. So this is the way things were sort of in the 80s, 90s, very early part of 2000, you see. But now that we have so much more innovation happening so much more quickly, companies may or may not need funding at all. They can go to market and establish proof with early adopters, and then a medium or large company comes along and buys the business. The buyers grow the business, generating really high returns. And the average exit time to return on effort is between 1.5 and 6 years. There's low or no dilution for the founders or owners because you haven't been in the market long enough to demand it. And that curve looks something like this, right? So if you look at this curve and realize that, well, this says that the earlier I start the exit process, the higher the probability of a higher rate of return, which is exactly what we see happening, right? In the past 5.5 roughly years, 85% of the private acquisitions that have occurred between $25 and $35 million and have occurred before the company was 3 years old. Well, that means that there's a great opportunity for early stage business owners to capture a very high rate of return very quickly if they start with their exit strategy, right? You get further out, further down the curve here, you can see that, well, yeah, you might have a $200 million acquisition in 12 years, but by the time you get there, you're so diluted, you're still going to end up with the same $5 or $10 million you would have gotten if you'd sold it sooner, see? So really, this net effect, the net effect of how this environment has changed, is it creates an opportunity for you that projections are based on future growth, not on historic performance. So the high valuation is driven out of those projections. You have a much higher probability of success, and you have a much higher investment rate of return. with no or low dilution. So the net effect there is that earlier exits equals a higher probability of a higher rate of return, right? And what that's done is it's generated a new opportunity for a large number of smaller, higher return exits. As I mentioned, $15 to $30 million in the past 54 months. It's actually up around $20 million now, but you get the general idea. Most occurred before the company was 3 years old. Many were pre-revenue, and this is a key component, certainly in the tech space, but not only in the tech space, right? The key thing here is that I had an opportunity to meet with Charles Rimm, one of the top Google M&A guys, and we were out at an event one day, and I asked him the question, what is your ideal prospect? And he said 90% or more of our transactions are small transactions, less than 20 people, less than 20 million, right, is the true sweet spot, and we prefer companies that are pre-revenue. So you want to think about that, right? A company that's pre-revenue, if you're in that mode where you're thinking revenue, 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 you know, you might be barking up the wrong tree there, right? Here are some examples of what I've been talking about, right? Here are some of the transactions that have all occurred before the company was 3 years old, some of them for pretty healthy returns, right? You know, Adscape, Food Spotting, that was about this time last year, Flickr, and so on, right? Pretty good returns, but it's not just for the small ones, right? You know, some people don't know that YouTube sold for $1.6 billion when it was 2 years old, right? Playfish, $275 million, 2 years old. Club Penguin, $350 million, 2 years old, you see? So, again, understanding what drives value and positioning yourself in the market early is what actually generates these kinds of returns. The problem is most entrepreneurs wait too long to start. I don't know if anybody reads Norm Brodsky. If you don't, you should. You should. He's a terrific resource in Entrepreneur Magazine, or Inc. Magazine, I'm sorry. Right? There's an article back in June where he talked a little bit about this. I think it's well worthwhile. And what this leads to is something that, you know, I refer to as sort of the most heartbreaking mistake that business owners can make. Now, this curve is meant to represent the rate of change in value of your business over time, right? So if you imagine it, you know, as you come out of the gates and you're starting to get some traction in the marketplace, the value of your business is going to grow reasonably quickly. Then over time, even if you're still growing your business, you're still creating new markets, you're still creating new customers, you're still creating growing profits, let's say, or growing earnings, right? The rate of change in value is going to begin to diminish. It's going to begin to drop off. Now, just because the rate of change in value is dropping off doesn't mean the rate of your value is dropping off. I'm talking about the rate of change in value. And so what's key here is that, you know, most people start to look at selling their business out beyond that 4-year window, and by the time they get through the exit process, they're down in the 6.5 to 7-year window, some much further out this line, and you can see that the value curve is no longer moving in their favor, right? Doesn't mean the business isn't worth money. It doesn't mean it won't generate good returns. It just means that it's moving in a direction that's not to their favor. What we suggest is that you start the process early, during the fast growth phase, and you time your exit so that you exit at the maximum value growth phase. And there's a couple reasons for this. First of all, you're going to get a higher rate of return. That's pretty obvious. But there's another reason. Put yourselves in the shoes of the prospective buyer. Now, they're going to go through their due diligence process for somewhere between 6 and 18 months. And if every time they go through their due diligence, what they're seeing is that you're either meeting your numbers or exceeding your numbers, that the value of your business is growing faster than it was before, right? That's going to cause them to want to accelerate the acquisition process, because they're going to be looking at these numbers going, these guys are extracting value that we want, so we want to buy these guys right away, you see? If the opposite is true, if your numbers, you're just meeting them, but you're not really killing them, or maybe they're slipping a little bit, your value has planed out, it's not growing at the same rate, right? So the value growth curve is not in your favor, right? They're going to tend to pull back and extend the process, do more diligence, do more research, right? Wait a little while longer, so it's going to extend the process, which puts you at greater risk, right? So the longer you're on in this curve, the longer you're on this process, the greater the risk to you, okay? So here are the key advantages of an earlier exit. First of all, you inherit some market inefficiency. There's just plain and simple, there's less competition out there. You reduce the risk associated with negative value drivers. We talked about that. And your valuation emphasis is placed on expectations of future growth versus historic performance. In other words, missing a quarter isn't going to kill you because you haven't had it yet, you see. And I love this quote from the founder of Evernote. Evernote is not valued at $1 billion because the business is currently worth $1 billion, but rather because there's a good chance it will be worth $100 billion a few years into the future. This is exactly what we're talking about here, is getting your business to be valued based on future projections. Right now, I can hear you right now. In every presentation I give, I hear people in the back of the room going, well, yeah, but I've been in this for 7 years already. I'm already past that curve. What do I do? Right? So what if you're not early anymore? What if you're out here on the curve? Well, this is where an organization like mine, not necessarily mine, but like mine, can help you, right? What we do is we basically innovate a new start. So we reinvigorate, right? We find a strategy. Sometimes it's a pivot from within. Sometimes we'll go acquire another company and shift you into a new market, let's say, right? Or we generate a new strategic partnership or something like that, right? We might take a product. The trucking story is a good story, right? We shifted them into a different market, which in effect restarted the value acceleration curve. But this time we did it with an exit strategy overlay. So we were able to exit at the maximum value point instead of well down the curve like we would have otherwise, you see. So there's always something can be done. It just takes some time to find it and sort of ferret it out. Sometimes it's a dramatic pivot. Sometimes it's just a simple thing that we need to do, and we can create a huge amount of value for you and your business, okay? So I want to talk to you a little bit about how to maximize the valuation or price that you get, right? So obviously the first thing I'm going to tell you to do is employ a strategic exit plan, right? Targeting high valuation markets, strategic perspectives, and really focusing on well-defined value drivers. I would say that's pretty obvious because that's what this presentation's all been about. You want to align and pace the business for a maximum valuation. And you're going to target, and you really want to use a targeted fit funding strategy if you need funding for the pivot, you know, getting the right amount of money from the right sources with the right terms and the right time, right? So there's some ways there that you can operate. You know, sometimes when we come up with one of these reinvigoration strategies, the company can capitalize it, right? Sometimes it's not that dramatic. There's enough cash flow, enough earnings in the business to fuel the pivot. Other times, the company needs some external funding to actually fuel the growth or fuel the pivot. If you do need that kind of funding, then we want to be sure we get the right funding from the right source, right? I think that probably makes sense, right? The next thing there is really to hire experts to build and execute the strategic exit plan, right? The key here is that an external team brings a more robust perspective for you, right? You're focused on building your business, which is where you should be focused, right? And we want you to stay focused there, right? You need to spend all your time and energy continuing to hit your key performance indicators, keep growing your business, keep doing the things that you do well, keep moving your business forward. You see, if you bring in an outside team, whether it's us or somebody else is not the issue, then what you want to do is leverage their expertise and their network, their view, their field of view, to actually give you a more favorable opportunity in the marketplace, right? And so that ends up giving you a way to maximize those returns. And really, here's what it's all about. The principles of the business must remain focused on running the business while the exit team maximizes value. Now, this list down below here is just a short list of some of the things that need to be done in order to manage through the exit process. You know, the key here is that, you know, there's one item there. I mean, there's over 400 elements in our due diligence library by the time we finish it, right? So there's a lot of work to be done. And if you're doing all that work managing and preparing for the exit, then you're not paying attention to your business. And that's the most tragic failure. When the founders of a business get all wrapped up in preparing due diligence material for an acquisition, lose sight of the primary business objectives, the business objectives slip off, you miss your quotas, you miss your numbers, you miss a delivery or something like that, and all of a sudden it starts to erode the value right out from under you. So while you're working hard to build a picture of great valuation, the valuation is just eroding because your business is no longer producing as it was when you began the process. So it's critically important that you bring in the right people and create an environment where you stay focused on building and executing the plan, and you have a team that's focused on building the exit strategy and executing that strategy. Okay, so in conclusion, I've been moving along pretty quickly, I realize, but I know we had limited time. The right exit strategy is the forcing function that accelerates big results and creates value in the business, whether you're planning to exit or not. Even though the exit comes last, an exit strategy should come first, right? And to realize that the exit event is when you really get paid for all your hard work, right, and risk and all the stuff you've done, and that strategic exits generate a much higher rate of return, 100 to 400%, right? And you get a superior path to greater returns. So one of the things that I do for folks, we're going to have questions in just a minute, but I've put some resources together exclusively for you all. I'm going to need to go verify this page, so bear with me if it's not completely ready right at the moment. It'll be ready in the next 5 minutes. But we're producing a book called A Winning Growth Strategy That Pays. You can pre-register for a free copy of that book. Just go ahead and fill out the form that's on this website, and you'll be able to get a copy of that as soon as it's published. I'm also offering for any EO member a free 1-hour strategic exit plan consultation over the phone. You can also register to receive one of those at the same website. That'll drop you right onto my calendar. You can schedule an appointment, and I'll meet you at the appointed time and answer any questions you have. We'll talk about your business, talk about your strategy, what you want, and hopefully be able to help you get aligned for it. Okay? So now I'm certainly available for questions.